We are MRover, and we're going to be talking about how we assist astronauts using rovers for Mars exploration. So just to quickly introduce ourselves, my name is Michelle Gehner. I'm a rising senior in electrical engineering, and I'm currently the outgoing president, and I've been involved in a lot of the electronics sub-teams in our team.
And hi, my name is David Baek. I'm also a rising senior. My major is mechanical engineering. And I'm the incoming president for this year, and last year I was the lead of the mobility sub-team.
So again, we are the Michigan Mars Rover team. We are a multidisciplinary robotics team we strive to compete in the University Rover Challenge. We were founded in 2000 with about 20 members, and now we're over 100 members strong. And we really, find a lot of people in several majors across colleges, including business, LSA, and engineering. And we have 14 technical sub-teams.
So our mission, of course, is to compete in 2 international competitions. But besides that, we also try to, kind of bridge the gap between what we learn in class, theoretical knowledge, and the hands-on real world problems, because it's not something we often get to do in class. Of course, we always try to grow diversity in the College of Engineering, and we really want to expose our members to real world project lifecycle and deadlines. We always try to model our system and process after NASA and other companies like that. So where we work is the Wilson Student Team Product Center. You might have heard of it. This is in this building. We have an area where we have a rover, all of our parts. We also machine all of our parts here. We build all of our electrical components, and we do a lot of our coding here as well.
So as I mentioned earlier, our main competition is the University Rover Challenge, and this is a very unique competition where we go out to the middle of the desert in southern Utah at the Mars Desert Research Station. This competition is hosted by the Mars Society, which is the largest organization for people who want to settle Mars in the future. And it's quite a competitive competition. 93 teams applied this year, 36 get to compete, and I'm happy to say that we made it into the finals round and we won first place in the qualifying rounds this year. Unfortunately, it was canceled this year due to COVID-19, but we are really excited to show you a lot of the work that we did this year leading up to this competition. And it's divided into 4 different missions that we have to complete. And the way we're going to structure this presentation is showing you all the 4 missions and how we accomplish each mission.
So the first mission is Extreme Retrieval and Delivery, or ERD. So in this mission, it's modeled after the possible scenario of an astronaut being wounded or somehow down the field, and then the rover would have to deliver the astronaut a water bottle or a toolbox or a specific tool. So on the field, the rover would have to locate that tool or water bottle and then drive it over and deliver it to to the astronaut. So this requires a lot of maneuvering over a difficult terrain, a lot of large rocks and obstacles, and then the rover has to be controlled behind closed doors very far away with not much prior knowledge of the field.
So of course, to do this, we need to have a robotic arm. And so we have a very unique system that has 6 degrees of freedom, and it uses custom cycloidal transmissions this year in order to be able to pick up a 5-kilogram payload. The reason why we have 6 degrees of freedom and these cycloidal transmissions is so that we can pick up an object from any angle with those 6 degrees of freedom. We also have a lead screw hand gripper so that it can outstretch up to 5 inches to be able to grab the base of the water bottle or the handle of the toolbox so that we can deliver those objects. And this is something that needs to be able to have a high load to pick up these objects.
So the chassis, we have a specific sub-team just for a chassis, in which all of the other components of a rover attach to. The chassis is made mostly out of carbon fiber tubes and features these hard points that allow a modular system of removing and attaching different components such as the robot arm. So it also features a 2 degree of freedom camera gimbal, and it's at the mid-mast so that the driver of the rover can see all around the vehicle. And then there's also a battery mounting rack that's hidden underneath the electrical box on the chassis. And so the mobility system, another subsystem we have is they're in charge of the suspension and the wheels. This year we're featuring a direction bias suspension, and we actually did a bunch of research leading up to it in order to fully 3D print wheels out of compliant material. And we use brushless direct drive DC wheel motors, and the mobility system keeps our entire rover at a ride height of 18 inches.
So this entire task is teleoperated, and the operators of the rover cannot see the rover when it's completing these tasks. So it's really important that we have good software to know the position of the rover and see about the health of it. And so our teleoperations sub-team has been hard at work creating a custom GUI in order to be able to basically identify all the things that we would need to know about the rover when we can't see it. So it can stream up to 2 cameras at a time so that we can see whatever angle we want from the operator's point of view. We can track GPS waypoints, and we can set one on this desert terrain looking interface on the GUI. And we can check the health of the rover, see if it's going to be driving when we want it to, if it's connected, if it's even on. And so these are basically a bunch of metrics that we can use to check about the health of the rover. And so the second task of our competition is equipment servicing. And so this is very much a task that's about testing the dexterity of our robotic arm and using fine control movements. As you can see, there's a mock lander right there, and we have to perform several servicing tasks on it, such as typing. And we have to push buttons and flip switches. And we also have to move antennas using our arm in very fine ways. And so obviously we're still using our robotic arm for this, but we have several different adaptations that we have created for it. So one example is the equipment servicing attachment. This attachment basically has 2 intersecting laser pointers that help us see which keys we're about to type on. And so that when they intersect the lasers, we can make sure that we're typing on the right key. We've also developed an inverse kinematics algorithm that allows us to fluidly move our robotic arm in whatever orientation we want without crashing into the arm itself. And so this is obviously very important for inverse kinematics when it's a fine controlled movement. We just tell it what point we need to go in space, and it will go to it for us instead of us having to teleoperate it with an Xbox controller.
So for all the events, we try to model our testing procedures after the actual competition. We believe that's the best way of doing it. So for equipment servicing, as you see, we built this rig to model the different kinds of things we would have to do for the event, including the keyboard and different levers and buttons. And on the right, we built a cabinet to test out our ability to open up the cabinet and insert a toolbox into the cabinet with a robot arm.
The third task in our competition is autonomous traversal. This is definitely one that's attracted a lot of CS majors into our team because we use the buzzwords computer vision and autonomy in our team because it's very necessary for this task. And so basically what we have to do here is we have to be able to identify a gate made up of AR tags. We have to center ourselves between that gate and then traverse it. So as you can see, that's definitely going to be involving a lot of autonomous navigation and computer vision capabilities.
So as you said, so for in regards to computer vision, we use AR tag gate detection. So we locate 2 AR tags in our field of view, and then we form a gate in order to drive between them. And then we also feature obstacle detection and avoidance. Basically, we have to be able to identify an obstacle in order to drive around it so that we don't damage the rover during this event. In terms of navigation algorithm and testing, on the left is kind of a diagram breakdown of how a rover makes decisions for itself in order to get around the field. And on the right, you can see kind of our view of the simulator. So throughout the year, without the rover completely built, this is what our team uses often to test out our algorithms. So basically, we can simulate the rover behavior, and then we can see if it's doing the correct things when in the correct scenarios.
So because this is a very drivetrain heavy task, we have to adapt our power system this year in order to be able to accommodate the timing for this mission. And so because we improved to brushless DC wheel motors, we upgraded our full voltage capability to 36 volts. And because these kind of batteries don't come very cheap off the shelf, we decided to make our own this year. And so we built our own custom 10S 5P battery made of lithium ion cells and spot welded using nickel strips. And this has allowed us to not only cut down a little bit on mass, but also way cut down on the amount that we've had to spend on the battery. We also use step-down converters in order to convert voltage down to whatever our logic and camera and whatever other sensors we need so that they're not all at 36 volts. Our communications sub-team is also extremely important to us doing well at this competition. We are using a 900 megahertz operating frequency because that's one of the 2 allowed bands for the competition, and we use a 5 megahertz bandwidth. At the base station, we use a linear amplifier to amplify the signal out to the rover, especially for long-range missions, and we use whip antennas on the rover to receive the signal. Another very unique things that we've been doing this year is a radio repeater design. Because some of our tasks require line of sight obstructed signals and we have to go really far away from the base station, we've had failures in the past where communications would get lost in the middle of the task. And obviously when communications goes down, it's really detrimental for our performance. And so we decided to build a radio repeater this year that has 4 patch antennas in a tetrahedral shape. And when it gets dropped from the rover in using a burn wire release mechanism, there's always 3 sides of those patch antennas facing whatever direction we need so that it can repeat the signal back to the base station. And lastly, the last task in our competition is a science mission. And so this is looking for signs of life within sterilized samples that they already, not sterilized, just normal samples that they give us. And we have to be able to acquire this sample. We have to do all of the data collection and analysis on board, stream that data back to the base station where our science team will then do a presentation about their findings to the judges.
So for our science system, we actually feature a separate robotic arm, and this is our sample acquisition system. So this year, you can do it in several different methods, but this year we chose 3-degree of freedom robotic arm that features translational and rotational motion. So you can see from the pretty diagram on the right, it picks up the dirt samples and it deposits these samples into the science boxes in order to be analyzed. So the system features switchable end effectors. So basically, reflectance spectrometer and microscopes are permanently mounted to the arm, and then there are switchable scoops so that after we deposit, instead of depositing just the soil sample, we actually drop off the entire scoop in order to prevent contamination between samples. So there's a video here that kind of shows that process. So you can see it drops off one of the scoops containing the soil sample, and then it kind of slides on to a new scoop to pick up the next sample. And these parts are pretty much mostly 3D printed.
So once we pick up a soil sample, we have 3 different science boxes that conduct the actual scientific analysis. And so within these, we have 3 different tests that look for amino acids, ammonia, and chlorophyll. So the first test, we deposit soil into a beaker where it tests for amino acids by heating up the sample and then squirting hydrogen solution into it using a syringe. And we use a servo with a 2-bar linkage to push the syringe. And our second test is ammonia strips. So we look for a color change by dipping an ammonia strip into the beaker. And that ammonia strip is also moved by a servo that will just dip it in and dip it right out to see if there's a color change. And then the third test that we do inside the science boxes is a chlorophyll test. So this is where we deposit the soil into a solution of acetone, and then we shine a UV LED at it to see if it fluoresces. And if it fluoresces, then we can definitely say that there's chlorophyll in the sample. We also do some pretty complex stuff with instrumentation. And so one of the instruments that we have is a Raman spectrometer. These things go for thousands of dollars on the market, and so we decided to custom build our own. And so as you can see, there's many optics involved in this, and basically what it does is it searches for carotenoids and carotenoids in a sample by shining a laser at that sample and measuring the wavelengths of light that is scattered off of the sample. And so once we know the wavelengths of that, we can compare it to known spectra of rock samples, and we can basically determine what sample is and if it has any signs of life in it.
So unlike NASA, we don't actually send our rover to Mars, and a couple key differences include our budget. Our budget's about $50,000 compared to their budget of $2.5 billion. Another key difference is that we have 1-year build cycles. Every single year, we completely revamp the system and make a new rover from scratch. So it's a very, very quick developing process. However, we do work with NASA to develop our science and systems engineering procedures. As I said before, we model a lot of our processes after how JPL works. And of course, several people on our team actually worked on Mars 2020 at JPL as interns and full-time employees. And we always try to increase the interest on our team for Mars exploration and NASA. So here's some of our social media if you want to check us out. Instagram's at MRover, our website is MRover.org. And if you actually want to see our full system in a 5-minute video, the one that we submitted for competition, you can check us out on YouTube, Michigan Mars Rover Team URC SAR 2020 submission.
So again, thank you so much to SEDS for having us at this event, and we would be happy to answer any of the questions that you have now.
Thank you so much for presenting. That's incredible, the amount of work that's packed into like one rover. That's a lot. So yeah, if there are any questions, again, raise your hand and I can unmute you, or send it in through the Zoom group chat.
I was curious where your testing takes place. You were showing some videos or some photos of some cool terrains.
Yeah, so we do testing in different sites. Pretty much, we can't do any testing on something that's very, very similar to competition because we're not in the desert. But in order to get pretty close, we go to the Baja Racing Test Track, which is just a dirt track of a lot of rocks and hills. And also, the new robotics building actually built a Mars yard for us to test with. So we got a couple of opportunities to test with it, but since they're still building it, we have to wait until it's completely finished. But basically, they built a small yard that resembles Mars. It's a similar type of dirt. So we aim to test more in there in the future.
Question in the chat, they asked, will they be rescheduling the competition?
No, they can't reschedule the competition because the Mars Desert Research Station is used by actual astronauts, and it's really difficult to try to re-coordinate a schedule, but they're hoping to do a competition again next year.
And then another question, what portion of the team travels to the competition?
So we generally take current and incoming leadership to our competition, which is usually been about 40 people.
Yeah, our team is massive. We have over 100 total.
However, we have been in the works to plan out going to the Canadian International Rover Challenge, and this is a little bit of a less established competition, but we hope to take newer members who are not necessarily going to be incoming leadership to that competition, because we've recognized a need that, you know, a lot of people are putting in really good work to the team, but they can't necessarily go to competition yet.
I think someone also asked a question a little further up. Can you manually control the robots when they are far away? Yes, I guess it depends on your definition of far away. We control the robot, the rover with one joystick for movement, and then an Xbox controller for the robot arm. I don't know our exact range. Michelle, do you know how far we can do?
When we're really blasting power, we can get up to 1 kilometer of range. So yeah, if we teleoperate it and there's no line of sight obstruction, then yeah, we could definitely do that. The tough part is that Ann Arbor doesn't really have a whole lot of places that are 1 kilometer long without any like buildings or trees obstructing it. So that's something that we found to be difficult in the past.